The DA made an announcement on BEE today, introducing a bill which would focus on poverty rather than ethnic identity. Matt Cuthbert is the DA's head of policy and joins us now from Johannesburg. Hello, Matt.
Good afternoon, John, and thank you very much for having me on your show, and good afternoon to your listeners.
Unfortunately, the nature of my show is that we've got about 8 or 9 minutes. Obviously, we could talk about this for a couple of hours and not touch the sides. But let's start, and if you could keep your answers as succinct as possible, I'd be grateful. I can get more questions. You can get more answers in. What led you to introduce this bill?
So I think fundamentally, John, we've had almost 23 years of failed transformation policy a la ANC, and the unemployment rate, the poverty rate among South Africans has steeply inclined despite all of the transformation policies that have been put in place by the ANC. This shows that there's evidence that they've fundamentally failed, and we need a new path towards inclusive growth for all. And that's why we decided to go ahead and put together this private members bill and to launch it in Johannesburg earlier today.
One of the statistics that was sort of jumped out at me between 2014 and 2024, decade of what should have been growth, black unemployment rate increased by 9 percentage points, while for white people, unemployment decreased by 1%. The difference is stark.
Most certainly, the difference is stark, and this shows despite the transformation policies of the ANC, they have fundamentally failed to change the structure of the economy and ultimately to enable South Africans to unlock economic opportunity, be able to get work, and ultimately to be able to make a living for their families. And it can't be that after 30 years of democracy that we find ourselves in this situation. And this is why we've decided to take up this issue, tackle BEE, and ultimately introduce an alternative that we think will work.
Okay, sum up what you think are, again, I know that we're skating the surface here, but sum up what you think are the key elements of the bill that you would hope to have debated and implemented.
So some of the key elements are related to our alternative scorecard. The first component of the scorecard is value for money, and this ultimately assesses the cost effectiveness, technical capacity, as well as the reliability of bidders who are then going to contract for business with the state, and this accounts for 80%. The second element of our scorecard focuses on economic inclusion. And basically what this allows is it allows for bidders to make demonstrable contributions to the sustainable development goals across 5 different areas. These include human development, economic empowerment, environmental sustainability, inclusive communities and governance, and a mixed impact option, which accounts for 20%. And then also, most importantly, considering how BEE has become a feeding trough for ANC cadres, is to include disqualification criteria. So this excludes bidders if there is a proven track record of fraud, corruption, or misrepresentation. And we focus on poverty as the proxy for disadvantage as opposed to race. And what this allows us to do is not only redress the injustices of the past, because the vast majority of people who find themselves unemployed and in poverty are black, but it also means we don't exclude any South Africans who are poor and in the lower LSMs. And I think this is the fundamental difference between our policy of empowerment, genuine empowerment, versus that of the ANC's.
Matt, there's not exactly a obvious degree of cooperation between the partners in the government of national unity. It's still, it seems to me, more disunited than united, and it's competitive rather than cooperative. But has there been, what attempts have there been in the various fora that might be available? You're not in cabinet, but you do have colleagues who are within parliamentary caucuses, within, I don't know, NEDLAC, wherever a forum might suit itself to engagement with ANC members on this, to try and persuade them of the merit of your argument, because I doubt that the ANC are going to be too impressed by what you're doing.
Well, I think fundamentally we may be in coalition with the ANC national government, but we're not there to agree with them all the time and to be co-opted by them. If we want to bring about change and represent voters' interests, it's important that we continue to advocate and try and influence policy in a direction that aligns with the DA's policies. And this is what we've been doing since the outset of the GNU. If we look at the budget debacle and the VAT hike, and we look at subsequent policy decisions that have been taken by the ANC, we have consistently challenged them. And that's not because we don't want the government of national unity to work, but rather the contrast, that we want the government of national unity to work, but it needs to be a competition for ideas. The ANC is no longer the majority party, and they need to realize that there's a significant coalition partner in the DA that also has policy ideas and wants to make the stamp on government. And that's why we are very firm in the policy positions that we take, and we make sure that we advocate for them. Furthermore,
which means, Matt, that you haven't had conversations. Now, I'm not saying that that is your fault. I suspect the ANC is as loath to have these conversations as you are, but the fact remains that you're shouting at each other from opposite ends of the field rather than trying to find common space in the middle of the field.
Well, I think this is not a new issue, transformation policy, and particularly BEE. This is something that has consistently come up during the course of the GNU and in cabinet and in various meetings that our parties have on a party-to-party level. These are issues that are raised consistently. We have now just said, instead of simply saying, well, we must scrap BEE and that is the end of the story, we've said, well, this is a tangible alternative that we think could really work and ultimately uplift South Africans. And it's up to the ANC, and the onus is on the ANC to come to the table to say, let's talk about this, how we rework empowerment policy in this country so that it doesn't just benefit the politically connected few, but there's rather an impact in the broader South Africa, and those who find themselves languishing in poverty and unemployment are able to climb up the opportunity ladder.
A listener who's obviously not a fan of the DA says you could argue that BE is not working, not because of the factors that you identified, Matt, but because the boys' club is still running this country's economy.
Well, I think if you look at the foundations of BEE itself as a policy, it's not something that was mentioned in the Freedom Charter. It was not in any ANC party policy documentation prior to the 90s. And the inception of this particular policy was big business getting in a room with political entrepreneurs in the ANC, creating a stitch-up where they could maintain the status quo, buy off ANC politicians, and the rest of South Africans continue to be trapped in inequality, poverty, and unemployment. And that's where the fundamental problem is with the ANC's approach to empowerment. And this is where I think the key difference is in the DA's approach, is that we don't favor insiders. We open this up to all South Africans, and we do this on the basis of poverty, as opposed to just re-enriching the same cadres time and time again.
Thank you very much to Matt Cuthbert, who is the DA's head of policy and a member of the National Assembly.